on February 12, 1945 at precisely 4:47 p.m. In the wooded hills near Epernay, France, a 22-year-old American infantryman named Jack Bigham lay flat against the cold ground. He was a sniper with the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, part of the 4th Infantry Division of the United States Army. The late winter air hung heavy with the scents of cordite and damp pine. In his hands rested a Springfield M1903A4 rifle, the standard-issue American sniper weapon of the war, but with one very unusual feature. The scope mounted to it wasn't military grade. It was something he'd built himself. His fellow soldiers had laughed when they saw it. A scope fashioned from a broken medical microscope, a steel ring from a dismantled German artillery fused to hold it in place, dials marked by hand with pencil notches. It looked absurd, amateurish. They called it a toy. They called Jack delusional. Some even said he'd get himself killed trying to play engineer on the battlefield. But now, just 27 seconds later, those same men watched as a German Panzer IV tank positioned more than 1,200 yards away, that's approximately 1,100 meters, suddenly erupted in flames. The explosion echoed through the valley. It wasn't artillery. It wasn't an airstrike. It was one man, one bullet, and one homemade scope. They weren't laughing anymore. This is the true and unbelievable story of Jack "Red" Bigham, the American soldier they mocked for inventing his own sniper optic until the moment he used it to change the course of a battle. It's a story about doubt, innovation, and the one impossible shot that made history. Blueprints in the dirt. In the winter of 1944, as the last major German offensive, known as the Battle of the Bulge, raged through the Ardennes, the men of the 4th Infantry Division of the United States Army were cold, exhausted, and slowly pushing eastward. By early February of 1945, the front had moved into the Champagne-Ardenne region of northeastern France. There, in the rolling hills and dense forests near Epernay, the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, known simply as 2 of 3, had been assigned a daunting task: to probe and weaken the German defenses entrenched just beyond the Bois de Dames Ridge. Among them was a quiet young infantryman named Jack Bigham. He was from Marshall, Kansas, a farming town of fewer than 10,000 people. Before the war, Jack had never held a rifle in combat. He was a mechanic by trade, a tinkerer by temperament. At 19 years old, he'd apprenticed under his uncle at a watch repair shop. He could rebuild a stopwatch with his eyes closed and steady hands, adjusting the microgears with such precision that older customers joked, "He must have nerves made of ice." When Jack was drafted in the spring of 1943, those same skills made him stand out at Fort Benning. During marksmanship training, he impressed his instructors not just with his shooting, but with his method. He adjusted for windage and elevation without being told how. He measured distances in his head using trees, fence lines, even shadows. But without a formal sniper program in place, and with few scopes to go around, Jack was assigned as a regular rifleman. By the time the Battle of the Bulge ended in January of 1945, the Army had begun to realize it was short on trained sharpshooters. Many of its scopes, such as the Weaver Model 330C, had broken, fogged, or simply gone missing. Resupply was difficult. In 2/3, there were only 3 scoped rifles for the entire battalion. Jack saw this problem as an opportunity. In early February, stationed near Epernay, Jack quietly asked to visit the battalion's field hospital. There, he salvaged a broken microscope, an American-built Bosch and Lohm model cracked during transport. He took the lens tube and fashioned it into an optical sight. For mounting brackets, he scavenged a steel ring from a destroyed German 88mm shell casing. Over 2 nights, he soldered, filed, and balanced the contraption onto the barrel of his standard Springfield M1903A4. When he showed it to his squad, they burst out laughing. "That thing looks like it belongs in a science fair," one said. "Hey Bigham, you gonna diagnose a germ or shoot a kraut?" Another joked. Even the platoon sergeant dismissed it with a shrug. "It ain't regulation. Don't come crying when it shatters on your first shot." But Jack didn't flinch. He believed in the tool because he had built it himself. He'd tested its range in the woods just west of their encampment, tracking tree lines and measuring consistency. The scope wasn't perfect. The image had a bluish tint. The lens scratched easily, and the zero drifted with temperature changes, but it worked. It magnified. It aligned. And most importantly, it was the only scope available to him. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was trying to be useful. In the hierarchy of the American Army in 1945, innovation usually came from the top down. Jack Bigham was about to prove the opposite. That sometimes in war, the most critical advances are born not in laboratories or factories, but in the mud under fire, and in the hands of a quiet young man who refuses to settle for standard issue. 1,200 yards of doubt. Jack Bigham never asked for permission to build his scope. He knew better. In the Army, improvisation wasn't encouraged unless it came from the top brass. But what he did ask for quietly, respectfully, was time. Time at night. Time alone. Time to make something better than what he'd been issued, which was nothing. During those early February nights in 1945, Jack worked under canvas just beyond the tree line west of Epernay. He wrapped his gear in burlap and oilcloth to muffle the sound of metal tools. His flashlight was wrapped in red cellophane stolen from a medic's signaling kit. He kept notes in a tiny ledger, calculating distances, crosswind drift, and adjustments for temperature changes. He was methodical, obsessive, focused. He dismantled the microscope tube into three main components: the objective lens, the focus ring, and the ocular. Then he mounted the system onto the Springfield rifle's receiver using two hand-fashioned rings clamped with scavenged bolts. The vertical reticle, essentially a crosshair, was hand-painted using a single strand of wire removed from a field telephone cable stretched across a ring of dental cement. It wasn't pretty, but it was precise. Every evening after dusk, Jack would walk to a clearing known as Red Hill, named not for blood, but for the iron-rich soil. There he practiced. He set up rusted helmets on fence posts at different distances. At first 200 yards, then 400, then 6. Each night he walked a bit farther back. He made notes, measured the angle of fall, tracked how the homemade lens held up in the cold. The scope fogged slightly in freezing air, but he found a solution. Applying a thin film of soap to the interior glass and polishing it off. It worked well enough. Jack never spoke much to the others during these drills. They knew where he went. Some watched from a distance, amused. Others ignored him. His platoon sergeant warned him once sternly, "You are wasting ammunition we don't have." Jack replied only once, "Sir, I'll bring them back clean." By February 10th, the division's intelligence reports had confirmed increased German armor movement near the Bois de Dames, particularly models identified as Panzerkampfwagen 4. These tanks, often shortened to Panzer IV, had been the backbone of German armored divisions for most of the war. The version most commonly seen in that sector was the Ausführung H or H variant, outfitted with 75 mm high-velocity guns and frontal armor as thick as 80 mm. For an infantryman, getting caught in the open by a panzer was a death sentence. The usual solution: air support, anti-tank artillery, or bazookas fired from close range. A rifle, even a sniper rifle, had no business against one. But Jack wasn't planning to pierce armor. He had studied the diagrams of the Panzer IV. He knew the layout. He knew the engine deck at the rear housed the fuel intake caps, often left exposed when refueling in a hurry. He had seen more than one spare fuel canisters strapped to the back of German armor columns. Standard operating procedure, easy to reach but also vulnerable. If he could aim for that, not the hull, not the turret, but a soft, unprotected target, he might not destroy the tank outright, but he could set it ablaze, force it to stop, force the crew out, create chaos. That would be enough. His plan wasn't crazy. It was calculated, but nobody believed in it. Not yet. With the enemy advancing, by February 11, 1945, the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Infantry Regiment had advanced to the outskirts of the Bois de Dames, a patch of forest overlooking a shallow valley near the Meuse River. The 4th Infantry Division had orders to push through German lines, weaken the last pockets of resistance, and secure high ground for the coming spring offensive into Germany. But something wasn't right. Scouts reported increased armor traffic along a dirt road that twisted through the tree line. It was narrow, muddy, and largely invisible from the air, perfect for moving tanks without drawing attention. Intelligence confirmed it. At least 3 Panzer IV tanks were dug in along the western edge of the forest, rotating shifts every 6 hours. The Germans were preparing for a stand. That morning, during a command briefing, Lieutenant Colonel Harris turned to his platoon leaders and made an unusual request. He wanted a sharpshooter in position by daybreak the following morning. Someone quiet, steady, and familiar with the terrain. The mission was simple but dangerous. Observe and, if possible, disrupt German vehicle movements without engaging infantry, cause confusion, pick off officers, force a delay. One name came up, Bigham. Jack was summoned to the command tent, where Harris looked him over like a man inspecting a piece of equipment he didn't quite trust. "I hear you've been playing scientist with a rifle," Harris said. "Yes, sir." "You think that thing of yours can hit anything past 400 yards? "I know it can, sir." Harris didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just handed Jack a map and circled a spot labeled Grid 17 Alpha, an elevated thicket of pine trees about 1,200 yards from the suspected German tank positions. It was a clear line of sight, but a long shot, longer than regulation, longer than doctrine recommended. "You'll go in before dawn. No backup, no noise, no second chances." "Yes, sir." That night, Jack packed light. His Springfield rifle with the homemade scope, 40 rounds of match-grade ammunition, all hand-selected for consistency, a pair of wire cutters, 2 canteens, 1 chocolate bar, no sidearm. He didn't expect to fight his way out. As the sun set, he moved out alone, cutting through the frost-covered field toward Grid 17 Alpha. He reached the ridge shortly after midnight and dug himself a shallow scrape beneath a fallen pine. Above him, the moon filtered through a thin cloud cover, casting long silver shadows across the treetops. The night was deathly quiet. No insects, no wind, just the distant thud of artillery and the occasional bark of a German machine gun far to the east. Jack adjusted his scope. He marked notches on a branch above his position to track the changing wind. He measured distance using fence posts and the width of the valley floor. He double-checked the tension on the mounting rings. Everything was tight, aligned. He lay prone, motionless, for nearly 6 hours. Just before dawn, a column of smoke appeared on the horizon. The Panzer was moving, slow, intentional. It emerged from the trees and paused just beyond the ridge line. Steam hissed from its exhaust pipes. A crew member, bareheaded, probably the loader, stepped out and began refueling from an external jerrycan strapped to the rear hull. It was exactly what Jack had been waiting for. One mistake, one exposed canister, one chance. He exhaled slowly. 1,200 yards. A target no bigger than a